Alright, this is for week 1 language arts. I just want to go over a few things before I actually get into the lesson. You guys do have quick writes every day, every week. If you want to go ahead and do all 5 in one day, that's totally up to you, but you don't have to. The idea is so that you have one every day, just like we did in class. You don't have to have just 5 minutes like we did in class. You can take your time. I want it to be in size 12 Times New Roman. I would like it to be double spaced, and I'd really like you guys to try and use proper grammar. A lot of you guys tended to start your sentences with and or but that's not how it works. That's a comma, and that counts as one sentence, not 2. A lot of you guys were trying to do that to get the sentence count, but I don't want you to do that. Also, your sentence count should be 5 this time instead of 4, because you guys don't have a time limit anymore. You guys have actually time to think about what you're going to write, and the quick writes aren't going to be that hard. They were never really hard to begin with, so you'll be fine. And then when it comes to IXLs, you have 3 due this week. You have R1, R2, and R3, and they are only to 70%. Because there are 3 of them. A lot of you guys had started them before you left for spring break because I had posted them on the board, which is fine. But if not, you guys have all week to work on them. They're about fact versus opinion because that's what we were going to talk about when we came back. And we already talked about a little bit. So this should be just a review for you guys. And then I want to say that some of you guys didn't finish G2 and Q1. G2 was about comparing 2 texts because we were reading 2 different stories, comparing, contrasting them using Venn diagrams. And then Q1 was about summarizing stories because we were working on that. And those need to be at 80% if you did not finish them before spring break. I will still take grades on those, so you have a chance to raise your grade because I'm nice. So now we're going to do page 65 through 72 in the buckle down book that we've been working on, which is just those print offs I've been doing because the first time I did it, it was really bad. I didn't scan them right, but that's what we're going to do today. Okay. One second. So we're doing lesson 5, which is about literature. It says, what's your favorite kind of fiction? Is it a mystery in which someone has to solve a crime? A horror story in which someone tries to get away from a scary monster? A science fiction story about humans trying to outwit creatures from another galaxy? Or is it a more realistic story? One about family relations or friendships? Is the story completely made up? Or are the elements of the story based on a true history? Maybe your favorite kind of made-up story is historical fiction. There are many different kinds of stories. Most fictional stories are based on these three things: a person or persons, in a place and at a time, with a problem. The people in the story are called the characters. However, characters can also be animals, birds, talking trees, sea creatures, and so on. The time and place of the action create the setting. The setting is where it takes place. The problem the characters face and the way the problems are solved make up the plot, what happens in the story. Most stories follow a set pattern. The beginning of a story tells about the character and the setting. It also tells about the main problem or conflict faced by the main characters or settings. The middle or body of a story tells how the character's problems or conflicts gets bigger and bigger. The problem or conflict continues to grow. The end of a story tells how the problem is resolved. This is called the story solution. In this lesson, you will learn more about fiction stories. Tip 1. Listen to what the author tells you about the characters. Imagine you were describing yourself to a faraway pen pal you've never met. What kinds of things would you tell them about yourself? Are you a boy or girl? What do you like? What do you like to do? what makes you laugh, and what makes you angry or sad. We kind of did a little bit of that when we had our pen pals to the people at the retirement home. In a story, the author tells you all sorts of things about the characters. Pay close attention to the words the author uses to tell about how each character and what the characters have to say. Also think about the characters are alike or different from each other. Right, directions. Read the following passage from Anne M. Martin's Christy and the Worst Kid Ever, a book from the Babysitters Club series. I actually have some of those books in my library. You guys may have read them. 1. As you read, underline details that tell you about the characters. So you're going to underline things that tell you about the characters, what they look like, what do they do, how do they act. Marianne Spear, the secretary of the Babysitters Club, is my best friend. And although we look alike, with our brown hair and brown eyes, we're both short. We have totally different personalities. I tend to speak my mind. Some people would say I have a big mouth. I hate to admit it, but I do say things without thinking sometimes. Mary Ann, on the other hand, is quiet and shy and sensitive. That doesn't mean you can bully her though. Although Mary Ann is always willing to see the best in people, she is very perceptive and honest. So there were several things in there that describe both the girls. So in number 2, it says fill in the chart that follows to show details about Mary Ann and the narrator, the person telling the story. So you're going to list things that it said in the way that Mary Ann looks and the way the narrator looks, and then you're going to put how Mary Ann acted and how the narrator acted. I got 3 things in about each box, so you should have about the same thing. Number 3, in what ways are Mary Ann and the narrator alike? So you're going to put how they're alike. It literally tells you they both have this, they both do that. So that's what you're going to write there. Number 4, what is one way in which the narrator is different from Mary Ann? So it said that I'm like this and she's like that. So what did it say about her, Mary Ann, that wasn't the same about the narrator? Okay, I'm moving on to page 67. Tip 2. Pay attention to the characters' thoughts, words, and actions. The things people think, say, and do tell us a lot about the kind of people they are. This is also true in stories. A character's thoughts, words, and actions tell the reader a lot about the character. As you follow a character, ask yourself, why is the character doing or saying this? Why is he or she acting in this particular way? Most stories are a mix of words from the storyteller, the narrator, and the exact thoughts and words of the characters. The exact words that characters say are placed in quotation marks. These spoken words are called dialogue. If you were in creative writing, we did a whole week on dialogue when we were taking turns writing stories about what characters said. Directions. Read the following passage and answer the questions that follow. Tommy zipped up his jacket to his jawbone and shivered. His mittens were wet, his fingers were numb, and his feet were like 2 heavy blocks of ice. His efforts in the cold were worth it, though, he thought. So pay attention to when things are in quotations and when it says something like he thought. It's payback time, he said quietly, though no one was there yet to hear. He had made 25 perfect snowballs. Now he waited in the freezing wind for Sam to come by. He tingled with cold and with excitement. In the distance, he could see Sam's red nylon coat moving slowly toward his hideaway. Tommy crouched behind a small cedar hedge, nervously licking his chapped lips and trying to moisten his dry mouth. His heart pounded. His cocked arm was tense and ready. He squinted, peering through the green branches, timing his first throw carefully. Sam neared the strike zone, with his hands in his pockets, whistling. Tommy froze for an instant, and then let the missile fly. Direct hit, bully, he yelled. Tommy grabbed wildly for another snowball. So there were several things in there that said what he actually said in quotation marks, and then things that he thought to himself. I find it helpful if I underline those things as I'm reading. As you guys know, I have you do that a lot. Number 5, fill in the chart that follows to show details about Tommy. So you're just going to fill in what he thinks, and then you're going to support what you say by what it says in the passage. What he says, everything of what he says should be in quotation marks, so it should be super easy for you guys to find. And then what he does, there's a bunch of things that he does, so look for those action words. Which phrase best describes Tommy? Notice it says best, so there's going to be a few that describe Tommy, but which one is the best? Tip 3, look for details that describe the setting. Most of the time, an author will give details about the setting, where and when the story takes place. Settings include what the place looks like. It also includes such things as the year, the season, the time of day, and weather, and so on. The setting can help create the mood, which is the general feeling or atmosphere in the story. The mood can be suspenseful or scary or sad or exciting or fun. So remember when we did the Mary Poppins thing, we said that mood is how the author wants you to feel, but then tone is how we felt about it. So this is what they're trying to make you feel. 7. Read the following passage from A Wrinkle in Time by Madeline L. Allingle. As you read and underline words that tell you about the setting. So this one, it's asking you to underline words that tell you about the setting, where and when it takes place. What does it look like? It was a dark and stormy night. In her attic bedroom, Margaret Murray, wrapped in an old patchwork quilt, sat on the floor of her bed and watched the trees tossing in the frenzied is in a panic, lashing of the wind. Behind the trees, clouds scudded frantically across the sky. Every few moments, the moon ripped through them, creating wrath-like shadows that raced along the ground. The house shook. Wrapped in her quilt, Meg shook. Number 8. Look back at the words you underlined in the passage. In the space provided, describe the setting. So you should have underlined words or phrases in there that tell you what the setting is, and you're just going to write it down. I also want you to think about how the story made you feel. What did the author say to try and make you feel like that? Did it make you feel happy, sad, scared? How did it make you feel? Okay, I'm moving on to page 69 with tip 4. The plot is what happens in the story. It's where the action is. The plot is usually based on some problem the characters have. Read the following selection from Super Fudge by Judy Blume. At this point in the story, Peter Hatcher has been asked by Mr. Green, the school principal, to help out with Peter's little brother Fudge. It's Fudge's first day in his kindergarten classroom. I looked up. Fudge was perched on top of the cabinets that were on top of the cubbies. He was stretched out, lying across the top, just inches from the ceiling. "Hi, Pizza," he called, waving. "What are you doing up there?" I said. "Resting." "Come on down." "No, I don't like this school. I quit." "You can't quit," Mr. Green said. "Why not?" Fudge asked. "Because going to school is your job," Mr. Green said. "Otherwise, what will you be when you grow up?" "A bird," Fudge told him. Mr. Green laughed. "Creative, isn't he?" Number 9. What is Fudge's main problem in this selection? We've been doing this a lot, so you guys should know what the main problem is. Number 10. What problems do Mr. Green and Peter need to solve? Mr. Green and Peter need to, and then you're going to list the problems that they need to solve. A character can have many types of problems. Sometimes the character's problem is with another character in the story. Other times, a character has some problem with nature, such as a storm. Characters also face a problem within themselves, such as having to make a difficult decision. Usually by the end of the story, the characters will have solved the problem in some way. The way the characters solve the problem often gives you an idea about the theme, or remember we said that was the moral of the story, or message the writer wants you to get from the story. What is the lesson they want you to get from that? Tip 5. Figure out what the characters want most. In many stories, the problem is the characters want something, but something or someone stands in their way. For instance, in the fairy tale Little Red Riding Hood, a girl wants to visit her grandmother, but a wolf wants to stop her. When you read a story, think about what each of the characters want most and why. This will help you understand their motives or reasons they do things they do. It will also help you figure out the ways the characters change and develop throughout the story. Take, for example, the ogre in Shrek. At the beginning of the movie, Shrek does not care much about the idea of love and seems unwilling to give it a try. However, by the end of the movie, Princess Fiona has won over his heart and changed his outlook on love and life. Shrek is a completely different character than he was at the beginning of the movie. So a way that I kind of summarize stuff that happens is by learning someone wanted, but so then. So like when it talks about Little Red Riding Hood, the someone was Little Red Riding Hood. So someone wanted, what did she want? She wanted to go visit grandma, but what happened? The wolf showed up. So she ended up getting eaten, right? So then the lumberjack came in and cut him up. And then everything was happily ever after. So someone wanted, but so then. That's just a little side note. Number 11. In the passage from Super Fudge, why is Fudge on top of the cabinets in his kindergarten class? Fudge is on top of his cabinet in his kindergarten class because, so what was his motive? Why did he go up there? Tip 6. Noticing who is telling the story. Stories can be told by one of the characters in the story or by someone outside the story. If the narrator is inside the story is written from a first-person point of view. A first-person narrator or storyteller knows only about what he or she directly experiences or learns about from one of the other characters. A narrator who is outside of the story, on the other hand, is telling the story from a third-person point of view. A third-person narrator may sometimes seem all-knowing, an invisible person who tells about the thoughts and actions of all the characters in the story. A third-person narrator can also tell the readers things that the characters themselves don't even know yet. Here's another point of view clue. First-person narrators usually talk about themselves in ways using pronouns such as I, me, my, we, and our. Third-person narrators rarely, if ever, mention themselves. So usually they say like she, him, or they use the person's names. The point of view of the narrator can make a big difference in a story. A first-person narrative reveals his or her own thoughts and feelings. This gives readers very personal insight into a character, but that view is limited because the narrator cannot explain the inner thoughts and feelings of another character. A story told in third person, however, can give some insights into all the characters' thoughts and feelings. The voice is not a personal, though, and the narrator keeps some distance from the characters, so it's not as personable. Read the following passage and answer number 12 through 14. Something must be done about that boy, Jack. It wasn't enough that he almost broke his poor widow mother's heart, selling her best milk cow for a handful of beans. Now, he insists on ruining my good name, calling me giant. How unkind to make fun of someone because of his size, and all that fee-fi-fo-fum stuff. To think that I, the very model of gentleness, will go about eating little children. So number 12 is asking who is telling the story. So when you're reading it, make sure you are paying attention to if it's in first person, is it saying I, myself, me, my, or is it in third person where it's saying he, she, or a person's name? Number 13, what kind of narrator is this? First person or third person? How do you know? So basically what I just explained. And then 14, how does the point of view of what difference does the point of view make in the story? Because remember we talked about the first person view makes it more personable, and then the third person view is they're kind of distant from the character. Okay, and that is the end of the first packet for language arts. And if you guys have any questions, feel free to contact me. Your parents will have the answer key on the Facebook page. Okay.